Hey people, just found myself here on this cracker little hilltop, and I've got an easterly, and I've been looking forward to this first hunt back in a long time, first proper big rush of it for the year, and it's lined up with excellent conditions. Excellent for this location anyway. I need a good easterly on this hill. It's going to come again tomorrow morning. Fingers crossed for maybe a few fallow, maybe some pigs. We'll see what happens. But folks, the main drive of this video is I want to talk about this time of year because it's formed as it's a critical time of year for me. I know it's a critical time for a lot of other hunters. We've got a lot of deer, particularly fallow and red deer, who are at their absolute peak in terms of meat quality and about to go into their absolute peak in terms of the rut experience that it can provide us hunters. Folks, I'm hoping that a lot of you have had a chance to check out a YouTube channel and also a big Instagram page called A Wilder Life. Guys, that's Dylan Smith. I was so lucky to go up and visit Dylan and Kira in northern New South Wales the other day. Guys, thanks so much for having me. So good to finally get up there and catch up properly. We had an excellent conversation that I was able to record Dylan's perspectives on this time of year. This is summer going into the rut, and we mainly focused on fallow because Dylan has access to fallow properties that he has had, well, many years of hunting, but also investing in, and that's multiple cycles that he's been able to witness and help give us some nuance, give us some insights into this really critical and exciting time of the year. Guys, I know a lot of you are going to be gearing up for the hunt, and I'm just hoping that this might lend a little bit of information for people who are new to the game, just trying to build a bit of that extra confidence. But guys, if there's folks out there who know heaps, have heaps of perspective, you know there's a comment section down there. I know a lot of people are reading it and getting a lot out of that, so please feel free to share. Guys, I hope this video is helpful. I hope it gives you some insights. It was a good morning out in the lovely patch of ground. Part of the water I haven't seen before. Really interesting country, rugged in some, like a lot of cypress pine, all that kind of stuff. And
granite, yeah.
Yeah, and it's nice to see an area though as well, which experiences an extremely high quality rut. You know, as in we're talking bulk deer. And if anything we saw this morning though, because this is mid-Jan, is we saw bulk does. It's not the time to be shooting does. It's cool to see does, and does are very important when it comes to the rut. We're not seeing bucks necessarily. What does this time of year mean to you, just in general? Because we're rut obsessed. You know, this is what we know we've got this focal point, and we want to be able to prepare ourselves, and it's not just about tweaking gear and all that kind of stuff. We want to just line things up to, like, I know for me personally, when it comes to the rut, I want to be there in the lead up and before it all kicks off, because I wanted the most high quality experience. I don't want that feeling like I'm going to miss out. Throw some perspectives from this morning. Like, what were you thinking when we come there, and what are you learning?
All I was thinking was we're probably going to see some does. Cool.
Yes.
If we happen to see a doe that hasn't got a fawn, maybe we might roll it. Maybe we won't. We didn't. Looking for pigs mainly, but I'm not, at this time of year, mid-January, in that particular spot, I'm not thinking I'm scouting for the rut because I'm hoping to see bucks.
Sure.
Like, in my spots, my scouting for the rut is I'm looking for as many does as possible, and I'm trying to pinpoint their whereabouts, their habits, the main points where they're finding their water, because their habits don't change anywhere near as much during the rut as what a buck's habits would from now to the rut. So I don't have that many bucks growing out their antlers on this particular patch.
Yep.
I have some bucks in other parts of this property maybe growing out, but typically, and what I've noticed the last handful of years, is the spot where we went today, where I mean the property is nearly 3,000 acres, we might have covered a few hundred.
Sure.
I have never really seen bucks growing out in that spot, and that's me putting in the miles the entire time from when the bucks are dropping their antlers to when the rut starts, and that's also having a whole bunch of cameras out, seeing stuff that I'm not there to see.
The golden thing for me in this situation, being able to ask you some questions about it, is when you have a higher density fallow deer population in one area that's repeating its patterns, you can take consistencies and apply them elsewhere. I mean, every context is its context, I get that. But for good folks at home who want to try and start going from 102 to 103 to a bit more, and maybe they have a little patch of ground, whether it be private or public, that they really want to get some more apply more nuance to get more out of it. Trying to line up these patterns a bit. And the first thing that I think of is like, well, when are the bucks actually turning up from what you can see on your cameras?
The last couple of years, like clockwork, all the bucks have just started showing up around the first week of March.
Yeah, right.
And when I mean showing up, I mean like all I'm getting is pictures of does or spikers, or maybe the odd like 2.5-year-old buck, like it's his first head after his spikes.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not, the does aren't bothered by them at all. And then just like that, the first week of March, I'm just getting, in some cases, dozens of bucks just from all over. And it's at all times. It's not like they just happen to be there and then they're there now. It's like you see all sorts of bucks on all sorts of cameras over a few kilometres spread.
Yes.
At all times. Middle of the night, you'll just get one random buck just hauling through, And
I mean, is that when you start to see, like, from the first few that turn up, it's like, oh, cool, well, he's got some recognisable features. He's a bit of a unique buck. And you're starting to see him all the time, or they're replacing themselves. I mean, obviously they're not rutting, they're not fighting just yet, or are they?
No, there's not a great deal of the rut activity besides maybe seeing a lot more rubs on the trees.
Yes.
But even though there are stacks of does, there aren't enough does to maybe occupy dozens of bucks.
Yes.
So I'll there might be some where I only get one photo of them,
Mm-hmm.
and they're somewhere else. I
They're
don't know,
shifting on.
I see them
Yeah,
they're on the neighbour's place or whatever.
Gotcha.
There are some that I can recognise, like every few days, and I might pick them up on multiple cameras, maybe over like a kilometre stretch. Not sure in terms of radius, because I'm not doing big circles necessarily. I'm just kind of following the ridge lines, but that's what I see, and that's maybe something for anybody who is wanting to find bucks to think about, particularly on like your public land. If you're wanting to scout for the rut, the fallow rut,
yes,
your job, I suppose, like the best thing you can be doing over January and February is looking for the places that have the most does, because the bucks are going to find the does.
Sure, of course.
And the does habits may change a bit over the rut, like a little bit, but they're still going to need their feed, they're still going to need their water,
You follow the magnets.
still going to need their shelter, whereas
Sure,
you
yeah.
can't necessarily target bucks in the rut with feed in mind, because they're not really eating.
Yeah, right. They're
So,
from their focus. I
Yeah,
see.
so and then when you're talking about the different seasons, like right now, mid-Jan 23, it's pretty dry in this area. Like the driest it's been for a couple of years. Certainly not as dry as 2019.
Sure.
But you can still pinpoint a lot of deer activity by focusing on water, like isolated water. Is that the only water for a fair way? If it is, then deer are probably going to be using it if they're a deer in that space.
But it makes me think that one thing that we're always looking for is, a little community of hunters. We're thinking, oh, look, there's a cold snap coming. Like, oh yeah, this is going to be it. We're going to hear them roar, and it's like, but we kind of treated that as like a rut trigger, and that wasn't happening when we were having these warm days. And it's not like I haven't heard them roar or croak on warm days before. I think, is that a rut trigger as far as you're concerned? That sense of a cold snap? Like, what do you think is going on there? Is that a catalyst, or is that a bit of a fallacy? Are there other factors, do you think?
Well, obviously I'm not an expert with this stuff, but the way I see it is, when people talk about the rut, they're not necessarily referring to the period in time when the deer reproduce. They're talking about roars, croaks, fights, scrapes.
Yes.
So when people say, oh, the deer need a cold snap to kick into the rut, what it's probably being associated with is the fact that they might be out and it's really, really hot for a couple of days. Then you might get that high pressure system come through where the weather really crisps off and you might get a nice frost. And then over that morning after, there's a heap more croaking and activity, and the deer are out longer. And it's usually much more associated with the fact that deer are just like us. They're more comfortable when they're not stinking hot.
Sure.
So people see a lot more rut activity during the cooler weather.
Okay.
And as we discussed before, like what actually triggers the rut is the days getting shorter, the amount of daylight each day, diminishing. The does pick that up. It's something in their eyes. It's referred to as like a photo period, and that's what triggers their reproductive cycles.
Right.
So if you have a rut where the days are over 30 degrees Celsius, which can happen in this part of the world. We're in northern New South Wales.
For sure.
You might not hear much activity, but the deer are still going to rut in that they're going to reproduce.
For sure. So yeah, I guess we found ourselves focusing on these superficial external aspects because it pleases us.
Yes.
We love croaking bucks.
Oh,
we love
yeah.
roaring stags, you know. Do you think it's the larger amount of animals in one spot that might bring upon, I don't know, more fighting, more argy-bargy, more of the fun stuff? Or I mean, like, if you see smaller pockets, do you find they don't croak or they still are croaking?
We were just looking at some of my footage from 2019 where there's what could be 40 or 50 does
Yes.
in the middle of a big open paddock, and somewhere around a dozen bucks just walking all around them, croaking their heads off. So you could kind of go, well, there's a lot of competition among those bucks for all those does. You could also say it's 2019, there's hardly any feed around, so they're all concentrated by the feed, so that I'm seeing a hell of a lot of activity.
Yes.
But a hell of a lot of activity in one spot, because that's where they all are.
It's concentration.
So fast forward to the 2020 rut, in my area, my wife and I had been flogging the deer with rifles over 2019 because of how bad the drought was, and the farmer needed us to do that.
Oh yeah, it was a deliberate reduction.
Deliberate reduction in doe numbers.
Yes.
And 2022 rolls around, it starts raining in January and doesn't stop. So what I experienced in that rut was lots of isolated croaks and much more intermittent. There was never a buck in that rut in my spot where I could just hear him going for an hour or two and I could just make a beeline and never get eyes on him. I'm just hearing a few croaks here, a few croaks there, a few croaks there, and what I can, I guess, deduce from that, and it might be wrong, but there's nowhere near as much competition for the does because there are maybe fewer does, and the water and feed increasing has just spread them all out so much. There's nowhere near as much competition over like a prime, like a really big group. We might want to just have a bit of that yarn about does dropping fawns at odd times and the rut dragging out a bit more.
Oh, definitely, 100%.
Yeah, just a commentary about the drought. And
good thought. And because there has been a little bit of broader commentary I've heard about that, not just in Australia, from overseas, but a debate and all that kind of thing. The last few years, and I've put it down to various factors, whether it be weather, drought, on and off, and all that kind of thing. Whether you see a rut that's a little less intense or not, but more to the point, a month later from April, just say we're using the first couple of weeks of April as the heart of the fallow rut. Like in May, again, like a month later, hearing croaks, seeing rutting activity, this whole idea of does not being impregnated during the rut and then cycling again a month later. Well, what's your experience with that? I mean, because I know like that happens around my way. It's not as big as, it's not like there's a whole second rut, but there's more rutting activity about a month later. Are you experiencing that? Is that something you've seen in May or June or anything like that?
I would say probably the middle 2 weeks of April are the best. If you were to put money on the best activity you're going to see in my area, middle 2 weeks of April. Having said that, in my patches, I've heard bucks croaking as early as about the 25th, 26th of March, and I've heard them croaking about as late as 26th, 27th of April maybe. So it's roughly a month. Okay, I'm not sure how long it takes does to recycle or whatever, but certainly the last couple of years, and I think it may have a lot to do with the drought, potentially knocking the cycles of does way out of whack, and that's an idea that I came up with based on stuff I've seen on trail cameras, because I'll be getting does of really different ages at different times. Like they're all supposed to drop at a pretty similar time, but I'm getting fawns. I'm getting pictures of fawns in February that look like a couple of weeks old when they should be a couple of months old.
Yes, absolutely.
So if a doe has dropped a fawn in January as opposed to November or early December, then that doe's probably not going to cycle as early as the rest of the does. Had a few yarns with mates about this, and they're picking up similar things happening on their cameras. So the droughts potentially had that impact, which is going to continue to linger maybe for a while. And as a result of that, that could, besides just maybe some does getting missed in the regular rut and there being a secondary rut in May, that could have an impact on the fact that I've been hearing bucks croaking as late as early to mid-July at some of these places. Now, it's not like a full-blown rut.
July?
Yeah.
That's just a head.
Yeah.
I'll let it that. Yeah. But it is though, like that's 3 months. That's
April, May, June.
Yeah,
3 months after. And it's not like you just go out and you're like, it's a full-on rut hunt. Oh yeah, some croaking there, some croaking there. It's more just, I'll be out and I'll hear a buck just let a few croaks out.
Right. And it's legit croaking.
All I imagine that is there must just be a doe cycling. He's getting the whiff, he's getting the, up in his palate, he's getting the flame and display happening. It's almost got the involuntary, and it's, I don't get too excited about it thinking, oh man, I'm going to have some sick rut activity to hunt here. It's more just interesting because there's no denying it's a buck. I think it could be a combination of the fact that some does might slip through the cracks and then they have to get bred again in very late April or early May, but it also, other people may have some stuff to contribute to that, and I'll be really interested to hear about that because a few people I know who know way more about fallow than I do have reinforced that idea, like, yeah man, the drought must have really kicked a heap of them out of whack, and I don't know how they may catch up or when or what, and it's just the way it is at the moment.
Well mate, if nothing else, thanks so much for having me up here. Thanks to you and Kira.
Man, yeah.
Absolutely love it. It was really interesting to see a beautiful patch of hunting country this morning. There's some Murray cod in the pond behind us here. I'm keen to have a little crack late afternoon. Let's hope that barometric pressure goes up. Biggest cheers, man.
Cheers, man.
Keep it natural, brother.
Absolutely.
Well, it was great yarning to you anyway, man, but like, that's just a nice way to finish things off, isn't it? Just here, like, you said it would happened, but like, just like I was yarning before, it's like, oh, you need to kind of see proof of the method, and all of a sudden, boof,
yeah.
He just looks so good, man. He's just so green. He's so pretty.
Yeah, he's in good nick.
There's just nothing like him.
Absolutely.
At all. Folks, just one thing I wanted to add. There was some fantastic rut footage that you saw in the conversation I was having with Dylan. Guys, that was filmed by Rob Smith, who's Dylan's dad. And I want to say big thanks to you, Rob, for letting us use that in this video. Guys, if you want to see more rut footage just like that, guys, you've got to check out Wilder Life on YouTube and Instagram. Dylan's got heaps of more of that kind of stuff up there. I think you'll love it. I've got my mate up here too. I wanted to just throw a few perspectives out there just about the period we are in now at the release of this video, mid-February. So like that's the heart of what we're talking about this summer into the rut. And one thing that I really like to target at this time of year, and I've been lucky to have multiple bursts of success on, is getting some good hard velvet fallow bucks. In this period when they're moving from their summering range, where they're literally just been trying to endure the heat, feed up as much as they can, grow their antlers, the period which they spend most time in soft velvet, so they're tucked away, and then things change. They get up and they're going to start looking for the does. It doesn't mean they're ready to rut straight away or anything, but they're going to start cruising the hills, and they're going to be starting to check out where they are, and they'll normally hang within range so that they can keep the sniff on and know what's going on there. But guys, I think this is a fantastic time to be hunting fallow, shooting fallow, as you can see. And it doesn't matter if it's not everyone's cup of tea, because if it's your cup of tea and you want to get a hard velvet fallow buck and mount them on your wall, I think they look absolutely incredible. They're just a beautiful deer at this time of year, and to be honest, they're my favourite, as well as the meat quality being absolutely excellent. I was really glad to be able to get this one mounted. It's a state forest one from a couple of years back. Trevor Willis mounted them for me, and some of the very, very tips were just borderline in terms of softness, but the antler set got freeze dried, and it's just the gingerness of the coat. It was a one-of-a-kind animal for me too. It was a really special hunt and I loved it, and that's why I get them mounted sometimes. Anyway, just a few notes on that, because I know there's quite a few people in the next couple of weekends who are itching to get into it. We're all getting keen. There's absolutely no reason why your peak hunting shouldn't start now and then move all the way into the rut. That way you're not missing anything. Anyway, a few thoughts for you there. Well, this is a pretty awesome way for me to kick off my hunting year. Extremely stoked. I really hope you've gotten something out of this conversation that I just had with Dylan. Obviously, it was very much rut focused, summer into the rut focused, and there's a lot of talk about bucks with beautiful racks. And one key part to that we were discussing is locating does, and boy, I've located some does, and I'm not going to stop shooting them. In fact, if I'm not shooting more does and hinds than bucks and stags this year, then I'm doing something wrong. I really believe that because I want to take ownership of these deer, and we either use them or we lose them. But is there a hard incentive? Look how beautiful this animal is. She is fat as butter. Beyond anything, guys, have an excellent start to your hunting year. Be safe. Take out does. Enjoy does. Fill your freezer with beautiful fallow does like this, and then move into an excellent fallow deer rut. Anyway, maximum respect to all of you guys. Keep getting your good times natural.